There are nights when the body lies, when everything seems quiet, when breathing is regular, when the eyes are closed and nothing, on the surface, seems wrong. Yet something is happening. The arteries are working. Pressure fluctuates. Blood thickens or thins. The brain cleans, regulates, repairs itself, or instead struggles, compensates, exhausts itself. And what separates a peaceful morning from one that changes everything is often what you did the night before without thinking. A small habit, a routine embedded over years. An evening ritual that seems harmless but repeated night after night silently wears down the vascular system from the inside, without pain, without visible warning, until the day when the brain sends a signal that no one can ignore. My name is Dr. Hillman. I am a specialist in preventive medicine with more than 20 years of experience. And in my practice, I regularly see patients who all tell me more or less the same thing. They were asleep. They felt nothing. And yet something happened in the night. A stroke, partial paralysis, loss of speech, memory that vanishes all at once. In the vast majority of these cases, when we look closely at their evening habits, the nocturnal routines repeated over years, we find the same mistakes, not extreme behaviors, simple, ordinary gestures that most people consider completely harmless. That is exactly what I want to talk to you about today. Not to frighten you. Fear heals nothing, but to arm you, to help you understand what your body is really going through while you sleep. On the Next Stage Health channel, we do not sell impossible promises. We bring you science, clarity, and respect, because you deserve to know what the medical system often does not have time to explain during a consultation. So stay until the end. What you're about to learn concerns your longevity directly and that of the people you love. To understand why certain nighttime habits are dangerous, you first need to understand what your body is truly doing while you sleep. Many people imagine sleep as a simple pause, a freeze frame between 2 days. In reality, it is the exact opposite. During the 7 to 8 recommended hours, your body enters one of its most biologically active states. Your heart slows down, yes, but it is not idle. Your blood pressure naturally drops between 10 and 20% compared to daytime values. This phenomenon, which cardiologists call the nocturnal dip, is one of the most reliable indicators of cardiovascular health. When this dip occurs correctly, the arteries rest, the vascular walls recover, and the heart conserves energy. It is as if, after a day of intense traffic, the highway finally empties and allows the surface to be repaired. But when this dip does not occur, when pressure remains high even at night because of habits you have never questioned, the arteries never truly recover. They stay under constant pressure, like a garden hose that was never turned off, never allowed to return to its natural shape. Over time, the walls stiffen, small cracks appear on the inside, and plaques deposit at points of weakness. One morning, one of those plaques breaks loose, or an already weakened artery gives way. That is a stroke. The first high-risk nighttime habit, the one I encounter most often in the history of my cardiovascular patients, is falling asleep too soon after dinner. Think about what you do after your evening meal. Fatigue comes quickly, the eyelids grow heavy, the sofa is comfortable, and you fall asleep there, or go straight to bed, your stomach still full. Here is what happens inside. When you fall asleep just after eating, your digestive system demands a large share of blood flow to absorb nutrients, while your cardiovascular system is trying to enter its nocturnal slowdown phase. These two demands are contradictory. The heart strains and blood pressure, rather than dropping, stays elevated or even rises for 2 to 3 hours. A Greek study published in the American Journal of Cardiology, following 500 adults over several years, found that people who fell asleep within 2 hours of dinner had a 66% higher stroke risk than those who allowed a proper digestion interval. The solution is simple. At least 2 hours between the end of dinner and bedtime. A light evening meal. A costless adjustment with a measurable effect on your nighttime blood pressure. The second high-risk habit is the small evening drink. A glass of wine to unwind. A comfortable ritual that seems benign. And in the short term, there is indeed a relaxation effect. Alcohol dilates blood vessels at first. You feel good. But 2 to 3 hours after consumption, the body triggers a vascular rebound effect. The arteries that had dilated contract sharply. Pressure rises again, sometimes above its usual level. And this vasoconstriction phase occurs exactly during deep sleep, when the brain is most vulnerable. Researchers from the University of Helsinki showed that evening alcohol consumption, even moderate, disrupts the nocturnal regulation of blood pressure and increases the risk of vascular events in the 12 hours that follow. Alcohol also fragments sleep, destroying the deep restorative phases and depriving the brain of its nighttime cleaning window. Aminata is 64 years old, a retired teacher, grandmother of 4 grandchildren. She came to see me for persistent fatigue and morning headaches. After discussing her evening habits, we discovered she had been drinking 2 glasses of wine every night for years. A 24-hour blood pressure monitor showed a complete absence of nocturnal dip. Her arteries never rested. After 6 weeks without evening alcohol, her morning blood pressure had dropped by 12 points. Her headaches disappeared. Her fatigue lifted. She was astonished. Here is something you may find surprising. The third high-risk habit involves neither what you eat nor what you drink. It concerns what you feel at the moment you close your eyes. When you fall asleep in a state of emotional tension, after an argument, a strong anxiety, or distressing news, your sympathetic nervous system remains activated. This is the alert system, the stress system, the vigilance system. When it is active, it releases cortisol and noradrenaline. These hormones constrict blood vessels, speed up the heart, and raise blood pressure. If you fall asleep before the transition to calm has occurred, your body stays in combat mode for part of the night. Pressure does not drop. The heart does not recover. A study at Stanford University, following more than 7,000 adults over 10 years, established that people living with chronic unmanaged emotional stress had a stroke risk 3 times higher than those who practiced emotional regulation techniques before bedtime. 3 times. What you do mentally in the half hour before you fall asleep has a measurable impact on your arterial health. Now, let us address a fascinating biological mechanism discovered relatively recently, which explains why sleep quality is even more crucial than we once imagined. In 2013, researchers at the University of Rochester identified the glymphatic system, a cerebral drainage network that is only active during deep sleep. During these phases, brain cells contract slightly to allow cerebrospinal fluid to circulate between them like a cleaning current. This current carries away the metabolic waste produced by the day's brain activity, including the beta-amyloid protein implicated in Alzheimer's disease, as well as all the microparticles that, if left in place, would progressively obstruct the small cerebral vessels. Think of it as a municipal cleaning service that only operates at night, and that every sleep disruption deprives of its working window. This system only functions correctly under 3 conditions. Deep sleep, which alcohol, caffeine, and stress degrade first. Good oxygenation of the brain during the night, which requires the absence of sleep apnea, and stability of nocturnal blood pressure. All 3 conditions depend directly on your evening habits. Speaking of sleep apnea, this is one of the most underestimated and most common risk factors in people over 60. Sleep apnea is the repeated interruption of breathing during sleep, often dozens of times per hour. Each respiratory pause lasts several seconds to a minute. The brain, deprived of oxygen, sends an alarm signal. Blood pressure spikes. The heart accelerates. The person does not necessarily wake consciously, but the vascular system absorbs a shock. Repeated hundreds of times per night, this shock leaves lasting marks on the cerebral arteries. A study from the University of Toronto involving more than 10,000 patients established that people with severe apnea have a stroke risk multiplied by 4 compared to the general population. Multiplied by 4. For a condition that many people do not know they have, because you cannot feel your own breathing pauses during sleep. The warning signs are there though. Significant fatigue upon waking despite a full night, morning headaches, snoring reported by a partner, episodes of feeling of suffocation during the night. If you recognize yourself in this picture, a simple sleep recording can radically change the course of your vascular health. We must also address nocturnal dehydration because its link to vascular risk is concrete and documented. During your sleep, your body loses on average 500 milliliters to 1 liter of water through breathing and skin perspiration. This loss, even if moderate, thickens the blood. Thicker blood circulates more poorly through small vessels, creates more resistance against arterial walls, and promotes the formation of microclots. That is precisely the mechanism of ischemic stroke, the most common type. A study from Tel Aviv University found that patients who were mildly dehydrated upon waking had twice the risk of ischemic stroke compared to adequately hydrated patients. The solution is not to drink a large liter of water before sleeping. It is to maintain good hydration throughout the day and add a small glass, around 150 to 200 milliliters, just before turning off the light. Caffeine also deserves attention. Evening tea, coffee after dinner. These habits seem harmless. But in people over 60, the elimination half-life of caffeine is often longer than one might think. Half of the caffeine consumed at 6 in the evening is still active in the bloodstream at midnight, keeping the sympathetic nervous system slightly activated, preventing pressure from dropping normally, degrading the phases of deep sleep. A study published in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology in 2022 found that caffeine consumption after 6 in the evening increases the risk of elevated nighttime blood pressure by 24% in people predisposed to hypertension, 24% for a cup of tea. It is not enormous in absolute value, but if you have known hypertension or a family predisposition, it is a risk you can easily and immediately eliminate. I want you to meet Bernard now, 68 years old, a former head chef, passionate about gardening. He came to see me for elevated morning blood pressure despite his antihypertensive treatment. Listening to him describe his evenings, I understood quickly. He was falling asleep in front of the television with his phone charging on his bedside table, waking several times during the night without ever drinking water on returning to bed, and taking half a sleeping pill he had kept in his cabinet for years. Each of these elements, taken alone, seemed harmless. Together, they maintained his nocturnal blood pressure at concerning levels and deprived his brain of the rest it needed. We restructured his evenings progressively. 3 months later, his morning blood pressure had dropped to the point where his cardiologist had reduced his treatment dose. Bernard illustrates perfectly that nocturnal vascular risk is never the product of a single isolated cause. It is the accumulation of several small imbalances that together create dangerous terrain. And that is precisely why addressing them one by one, in a logical order, produces results that often exceed expectations. Before giving you a concrete action plan, you need to know how to recognize the signals your brain may send before a vascular event. Because in many cases, the brain warns before it gives way. It sends messages that most people ignore, attributing them to fatigue or age. And that ignorance is very costly. The first signal to take seriously is the recurring morning headache, especially when it is located at the back of the skull, heavy and diffuse. This type of morning headache is often a sign of elevated nocturnal blood pressure or poor cerebral oxygenation during sleep. It is not ordinary fatigue. It is an alert the body sends, hoping it will be heard. The second signal is the temporary numbness or weakness of an arm, a leg, or one side of the face, even if it disappears within minutes. What is called a transient ischemic attack is a temporary interruption of cerebral circulation that resolves on its own. The fact that it disappears should not be reassuring. On the contrary, studies show that 1 in 3 people who experience such an untreated episode have a major stroke within 3 months. 3 months, that is a precious intervention window. Every episode of temporary numbness deserves an urgent medical consultation. The third signal is blurred or double vision, even brief, especially if accompanied by dizziness or a sudden difficulty finding words. The fourth signal is recurring morning mental confusion, a persistent disorientation that lasts several minutes after waking and bears no resemblance to the simple, usual morning grogginess. A study from the National Institute of Neurological Disorders found that 70% of nocturnal stroke victims had experienced at least one of these signals in the 7 days preceding the event, and only 8% had consulted a doctor. That statistic haunts me, because it means that in the majority of cases, there was an opportunity to intervene, to prevent, and that opportunity was missed because the signals were not recognized. Now you know them. Let us move to what you can concretely do. Understanding risks without an action plan is like knowing the weather forecast without an umbrella. Here are the pillars of a nocturnal routine that protects your brain and vascular system. The first pillar is regular sleep timing. Your brain operates according to a biological rhythm, the circadian rhythm, which regulates not only waking and sleeping, but also blood pressure, hormonal secretion, and cellular repair cycles. Every time your bedtime varies by an hour or two from one evening to the next, this internal clock is thrown off. Nocturnal regulatory mechanisms become less effective. The nocturnal blood pressure dip occurs less well. Researchers at the University of Oxford followed more than 88,000 people for 7 years and found that individuals with irregular sleep timing had a cardiovascular risk 43% higher than those maintaining a stable routine. Going to bed and waking at the same time every day, including weekends, is one of the most effective and least costly preventive measures available. The second pillar is your bedroom environment. Cool, between 19 and 22 degrees Celsius in the most complete darkness possible. Total darkness is essential because it triggers the secretion of melatonin, the master hormone of sleep. Melatonin regulates nocturnal blood pressure, protects vascular cells against oxidative stress, and coordinates the deep sleep phases necessary for glymphatic cleaning. A study published in Hypertension Research showed that even slight exposure to artificial light during the night increases average systolic blood pressure by 27%. 27% for a simple nightlight left on. Blackout curtains, no glowing standby lights from electronic devices, no screens in the bedroom, and air out your bedroom for 10 minutes before bed. Stale air accumulates carbon dioxide, lowers available oxygen, and can significantly raise nocturnal blood pressure. Your brain needs fresh air to work properly. The third pillar is conscious breathing as a transition ritual. I am not asking you to meditate for an hour. I am talking about 5 minutes. Lying in bed, before closing your eyes, you breathe in slowly through the nose, counting to 4. You hold for 2 seconds. You breathe out slowly through the mouth on 6 seconds. 10 cycles. That is all. This practice activates the parasympathetic system, the system of calm and recovery. Heart rate slows. Pressure drops. Arteries relax. Researchers at Kyoto University demonstrated that a 5-minute session of slow, conscious breathing before bedtime reduced average nocturnal blood pressure by 7 millimeters of mercury. That is an effect comparable to certain light antihypertensive medications. Without a prescription, without side effects, without cost. The fourth pillar is your sleeping posture. Sleeping on your back with your head slightly elevated by about 15 degrees using a good density pillow facilitates venous return from the brain and improves glymphatic system efficiency. Research from Stanford University established that this position improves glymphatic drainage by approximately 25% compared to a flat position. The ideal is a support that keeps the neck naturally aligned with the rest of the spine, without tilting forward or backward. The fifth pillar is nocturnal gratitude. Positive emotions release nitric oxide, a molecule that naturally dilates blood vessels. Before falling asleep, take 30 seconds to think of 2 or 3 concrete positive things from your day. A pleasant conversation, a moment of sunshine, a child's voice on the phone. Researchers at UC Berkeley showed that this practice reduced average blood pressure by 6 millimeters of mercury within weeks. Inner peace is not esoteric. It is measurable in your arteries. Some of you may be wondering about medications. Many people over 60 have been self-medicating with sleep aids for years without revisiting the question with their doctor. A French study published in The Lancet Neurology showed that regular users of nighttime tranquilizers had a 41% increased stroke risk, not because of direct toxicity, but because of the combined effects on breathing, circulation, and nocturnal vascular tone. These substances can slow breathing, worsen existing apnea, and alter deep sleep phases. If you regularly rely on a pharmacological sleep aid, a conversation with your doctor is in order to find a solution that does not compromise your long-term vascular health. I also need to remind you of something important. Everything I have shared today consists of hygienic and dietary preventive measures. They complement medical follow-up, they never replace it. If you have known hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, or a vascular history, apply these habits in dialogue with your doctor. If you take anticoagulants or antihypertensives, some dietary changes may interact with your treatment. And if you recognize yourself in the warning signals I described, recurring morning headaches, temporary numbness, dizziness, confusion upon waking, do not put off the consultation. Layla is 71 years old. She came to see me after her husband had a stroke in his sleep. She wanted to understand, to know if she was at risk too. Analyzing her habits, we found she was combining several of the risk factors I have described. Heavy late meals, intensive phone use until bedtime, an overheated and poorly ventilated bedroom, and chronic stress related to her family situation. We worked together on these points for 3 months. The blood pressure monitor at the end of that follow-up showed a normalized nocturnal dip, morning blood pressure back within target values, and significantly improved deep sleep quality. Layla told me something I have not forgotten, that for the first time in years, she woke in the morning without being afraid of what she would find. That is preventive medicine at its most beautiful, giving someone back the ability to trust their body, to sleep without fear, to wake with the energy of a new day. A meta-analysis published in the British Medical Journal established that people adopting a set of good nighttime habits reduced their stroke risk by 58% compared to those applying none. 58%. The result of simple gestures, repeated, anchored in routine. Not an expensive treatment, not a superhuman effort. So tonight, start with just one thing. One single thing. Move your phone away from your pillow. Put it at the other end of the room, or on airplane mode on your bedside table. It is the simplest, most immediate step that improves sleep quality, reduces nocturnal light stimulation, and protects melatonin secretion. One thing tonight. Tomorrow, add the glass of water before bed. The next day, try the 5 minutes of slow breathing, then adjust your dinner timing. Each week, one change, one step toward a stronger vascular system. And this confidence, you can find it again too. It is never too late for the body to respond, for the arteries to recover, for the brain to rediscover the conditions for true rest. If this video brought you something useful, share it with someone you care about. Preventive information saves lives, but only if it spreads. Subscribe to Next Stage Health so you do not miss any upcoming videos. And leave a comment tonight. Tell me which habit you are going to change first. Just one. Write it down. Because putting words to an intention is already the first step toward action. I am Dr. Hillman. Sleep well tonight. Not just to recover, but to repair yourself, to clean, to strengthen. Make your night the best preventive medicine there is. Your brain is counting on you.